I just want to start out with just talking about a couple things that are related to criminal justice. But before I do that, I do want to mention that I recognize, and I think most of county and city leadership recognizes how hard the shelter in place and how hard this virus has been on our community members. And people have lost their jobs, businesses have closed, schools have closed, people are feeling isolated and alone, and a lot of families are struggling. And so I just want to recognize that. I have 3 adult kids. 2 have lost their jobs. The third one, her business is really struggling. And I know that this has been hard on a lot of people, and we're all doing our best to get through this. And so my job during this health emergency is to support the public health officer. The public health officer during a pandemic has tremendous authority around the state. And so not only is my job to support her, but it's also the things that we do on a regular basis: keep the peace, enforce the law, make sure that all countywide law enforcement are working together. And then also a very big piece of what we're doing is taking care of the people who are incarcerated in our jail system. And keeping our staff healthy is a top priority, because if we don't have healthy staff, we can't keep those jails open and we can't answer the calls for service. But in terms of the county jail system, I've had a number of people send me emails or call me wanting to make sure that we're being mindful on how we take care of these folks. And what I'm seeing with my sheriff's organizations, as well as just on the news, is that jails and prisons across the country are reporting a really high rate of spread. One of the largest outbreaks in the country last week was the Cook County Jail in Chicago, where over 500 incarcerated people and staff were infected. This week there's a jail in North Carolina that holds 2,400 people. 1,800 of the incarcerated people there have tested positive. And then today, Rikers Island is a huge outbreak there in New York. And so it's a real issue in terms of this virus getting into a jail. And the good news locally is that there is not a single confirmed case of the virus in our jail system. And the reason why this is so important to the community at large is that if this virus gets into a jail system or into our jail system, we could easily exhaust our local hospital resources. And so we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to preserve those very valuable beds that are in our hospitals. And so we've taken a lot of precautionary measures to keep our jails safe. We've increased our jail medical staff. We medically screen every staff member that comes in the facility for work. Any vendor, any attorney gets medically screened. We've established 14-day quarantine units for people who come into our jail and are going to be housed. They go right into a 14-day quarantine before they go into general population. And then we've increased the frequency of the cleaning of all the housing and intake areas. We're also utilizing some release orders that the public health officer issued and the presiding judge issued, modified our booking criteria in order to get our jail population down to a manageable level. Last week, the State Judicial Council issued an order that reduced the bail to 0 for most nonviolent crimes in order to keep the jail populations down across the state. And so I'm really happy in terms of our progress on the jail systems, and it's going in the right direction. In terms of the law enforcement side, I've established a countywide law enforcement operations center out of the sheriff's office where all agencies have people that work out of. And we do that to make sure that all the law enforcement agencies are communicating daily. We can watch crime trends countywide rather than by jurisdiction. And then we can move resources where they're needed countywide, not just by jurisdiction. And we're also ensuring that all agencies have the appropriate level of PPE so that their staff is safe. I did get some feedback on this when we announced it. Some community members were speculating that we established this as a step towards martial law. I want to assure everybody that's not the case. It's all about having a coordinated law enforcement effort around this pandemic. I've been hearing some anecdotal stories out there about domestic violence and mental health and suicide being on the increase. For the first month of this, when we started our own Operations Center March 4th. So for all of March, everything, crime rates and the social issues like around mental health, those all remain fairly stable, or in fact, very stable. The first 2 weeks in April, though, we've seen an uptick of about 20 to 25% on calls for service around domestic violence, and we've seen about a 10% increase on mental health-related calls. In terms of suicide, unfortunately, we average about 3 suicides a month in our county, and those numbers are holding firm. We have not seen an increase in those numbers. I want to touch briefly on the public health officer's order. And John, I know you dealt with a lot of concerned people, as did every board member, and I certainly heard a lot before the supplemental order was issued 2 weeks ago that closed all parks and beaches. We were getting a lot of calls, a lot of emails about that we needed to close parks and beaches, that it was causing a health hazard to have those open. And so I met with the public health officer and talked about the spring break week and the Easter weekend, and we discussed the potential to close down the beach and the parks for that week. She went ahead and did that. And then as soon as we closed those beaches, then we heard from another group that we shouldn't have closed the parks and beaches. And so this is a really polarizing issue. It reminds me a lot of the 4th of July, where about half the public wants the fireworks to go off as a celebration. The other half doesn't want the fireworks to go off. And so as the sheriff, I'm kind of stuck in the middle on this, but what I'm committed to is listening to the public health officer. She's a medical doctor. She's our public health doctor. I mean, she's my doctor. She's your doctor. She's all of our doctor. And I think we should listen to the doctor's orders. She's communicating with all the Bay Area counties, and they're holding to a very consistent message in Northern California, particularly the Bay Area. And so she's educated. She's trained in this area, and she's the expert in this field. So I just encourage people to honor that and listen to what she has to say. But the last item I want to touch on before I answer any questions is that once this pandemic is brought under control, it's going to be brought under control with a vaccine, with medication, and with a robust testing plan. I mean, that's how we've got to bring this thing under control. But once it's brought under control, we face an economic challenge that some economists are saying are going to be up to 4 times more severe than the 2008 recession. And that the economic impact of this pandemic is going to have long-lasting influence on local, state, and federal budgets for years to come. It took our county government about 5 years to pull out of the recession. We really felt it from 2009 to 2014. And so I'm expecting something along those lines. And local government, institutions like the sheriff's office, like the fire departments, like our EMS systems, our police departments, when this thing's over and we start working on the economic issues, some of these institutions may not even be recognizable in terms of personnel and services we're able to deliver once this pandemic's over. And I'm super concerned about this. And I'm going to strongly advise our county policymakers that cutting first responder budgets is not a good idea. And I hope this does not happen. And I'll be working closely with John and the Board of Supervisors as well as the county administrative officer on this. But it's a reality that we're going to be facing once this thing's over, and some difficult decisions are going to have to be made. But right now, in this moment, all we have is right now. We don't know what next week brings. We don't know what next month brings. But right now, my top priority is to help our community get through this emergency that's right in front of us. And then we'll work on the economic fallout afterwards. I just want to remind people that we're not in our peak. And our peak is projected to happen many weeks from now, right around June 12th is what the county epidemiologists are saying. And that number bounces back and forth, or that date bounces back and forth. And what I'm finding is that these epidemiologists are very bright people, but they're working with numbers, and those numbers are influenced by a lot of variables. And so those projections bounce around from day to day. But today we're looking at June 12th as far as our peak period. And so we can't get complacent. We can't let our guard down. This virus has the potential to be devastating if we turn our back on it. So we have to stay vigilant on this. And I just want to end with this, that I'm very proud of our community members for stepping up and taking this crisis seriously. We're asking people to do some really, really difficult things. But what we're doing as a county is working, and that's evident by our low rate of spread, one of the lowest rates in the state. And we need to continue to be vigilant and listen and trust our health experts. And then lastly, we need to rely on data and science to make informed decisions as we move ourselves through this. So with that, John, I'm happy to answer any questions or listening comments anybody has.
Thank you, Sheriff Hart. I think that you've been placed in lots of unusual positions with this COVID crisis. We are asking you to do a lot of different things. I appreciate your leadership, both in our jail and on the streets. I think it's important to have someone who's as clear-minded and as thoughtful as you are. I want to make sure that people get a chance to ask questions, and so if you have a question for me or Sheriff Hart, you just hit star 41. And then we will unmute you, and you will hear a voice telling you you've been unmuted. And then you can just give us your name and ask a question. And we want to make sure to get it to everybody's questions tonight. So maybe we could just have the first question from the public.
Hi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. Good evening.
This is Allison Butler. I live in Pleasure Point, and I have some very simple questions. One, given what you just stated, Sheriff Hart, that we're not supposed to peak until the 12th and that you're listening to the health officer, I want to understand why the shelter-in-place order is not being enforced in our neighborhood. I have right now 20 cars just in front of my house, all surfers who have driven here or people who have driven here to walk, which clearly is stated on the sandwich board sides for 2 plus weeks on East Cliff that you shouldn't drive or take public transport to recreation areas, and it's packed. I mean, people are not social distancing. People are meeting here to go out and surf together. And when we try and reach out to get help, we get, let us do our job. But the job has not been done. Last weekend, it was as crowded as any holiday weekend ever. There was 12 people at the picnic tables in front of the sheriff's van, nobody around. My husband was threatened by the people at the picnic table for trying to say, hey, for trying to find a sheriff to enforce this. We need you to enforce this. We need you to start citing people who are driving to our neighborhood that is completely impacted. We are not being protected, and we are not being supported. So why are you not enforcing this? You don't have to give them a $1,000 citation. You need to give them a ticket so that the word gets out that you are not to drive here to come and recreate. Period. Until this shelter-in-place is ordered, period.
Let's give him a chance to answer the question, Allison. Let's give him a chance to answer the question. Sheriff Hart.
Yeah, so we are heavily enforcing the shelter-in-place order. We've issued out over 250 citations. I was interviewed by NBC Bay Area, and the person that interviewed me wanted to know why we were enforcing so hard and the other Bay Area counties weren't. And I was asked, would it surprise you that the Bay Area counties have only written 2 citations and you've written 250 and the Santa Cruz Police Department's written 200? And so we are enforcing, but our borders are not closed right now. And we've been advised by our county attorneys, as the public health officer has, that people can travel to Santa Cruz. And so our borders aren't closed. We're asking people not to travel to Santa Cruz, but they are. And so we do have people here. We do have people in the water, but the public health officer and her order that was issued about 3 or 4 weeks ago before the supplemental order was issued is allowing people to surf, allowing people to walk on East Cliff and West Cliff and in their neighborhoods. And so there's only certain things that we can do. If somebody is walking down East Cliff with their family member and they're holding hands or they're within a couple feet, that's not a violation. What we're concerned about and what the public health officer is telling us is that small groups of people passing each other, are the percentage or the chances of them getting affected are super low. It's contact with somebody in close proximity for 10 minutes or more, and so that's why she's saying she doesn't want large groups on the beach. She doesn't want house parties. She doesn't want people congregating from outside of the household and in confined spaces or within short distances of one another. So, I understand your frustration, but I'll tell you what, we have had put a lot of person power out there in the East Cliff area. And I was told that when that photograph was snapped, my staff said that they were dealing with another issue by the Hook parking lot, and that's why the deputy wasn't at his van when those people were at the park bench. But I don't know if they were all family members. If they're all family members, that's one thing. If they weren't, that's another thing. But I'll tell you, Allison, we're doing the best we can. We have a lot of people out enforcing. We've done a lot of enforcement. We spent our first 7 or 8 days asking people, educating people, in some cases cajoling and begging people to do the right thing. Then we went into an enforcement posture where we issued a whole bunch of citations. There's people on the other side of those citations who are just as passionate about, as you are, Allison, on the other side of this. They're saying we should be able to go outside, that government is being overreaching, our constitutional rights are being violated. I'm not even allowed to go visit a beach that I pay high property taxes for. And so there's people on both sides of this issue, and we're right in the middle of it. We're trying to navigate that fine line, and frankly, I think my staff's done a really good job, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing. We can't be everywhere at once, but we're out there, we're present, we're engaged, and we're trying to do the best we can to keep our community safe.
I just want to add that, we've tried to telecast to other communities that we're not open for business. We work to have the Caltrans sign on Highway 17 changed. We are upping our enforcement of the vacation rental ban. We've tried to limit parking, and we started the parking program early as a way just to control who's down there. But we are not going to put a barricade up on Highway 17 and prevent people from coming here, even if we could. So I want to make sure we get other questions. Is there another question? If you want to ask a question, please hit star 41, and that'll raise your hand.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Josie Roberto, and first of all, I would like to say thank you to Sheriff Hart. I'm just in awe of the amount of work you've had to deal with, and just to get on and share your feelings about being in this community. It's not an us and them situation, that you're basically in the same situation as everybody else. And I just wanted to say thank you for doing a great job considering the circumstances. And same to John, thank you for doing this town hall meeting. I really appreciate it. I just want to get an idea. First of all, I have 7 kids here. Half of them are adults. Some of them are small children, and we're trying to stay at home as much as possible. We have, trampolines and gardening and everything, but, we do live within very close distance of Seabright Beach, and I just feel like that's the safest place to really get the kids out and running and playing, where they get fresh air, but there's barely anybody around. And I think that's very important. We did abstain for that 1 week. However, we went back, and I have to drive there. So I think it's important for people to know. I mean, I have a 3-year-old. I'm not going to walk all the way to the beach. I'm going to drive, and I'm going to get out. And, for 3-year-olds or 1-year-olds, you need to, you can't just keep moving. So the second, we haven't been having any problems, but the last time we were there, we have our grandson who's a newborn strapped to my son. We have our 3-year-old, and we have the other 2 little. And, it's fine. The bigger kids can run around, and we can keep walking. But sometimes you have like a circle radius where they play. And especially for really younger kids, that's a part of playing. But the state park ranger came right up and the first thing out of his mouth was, "You can't be here." then I said, hey, we're exercising the kids. What's going on? And then he explained, okay, well, you have to keep it moving. You have to keep walking. And I said, well, I get it. I understand. We're not from out of town. We're just right down the street. We're not, out of towners just come here to camp out and have a big party. And, he was, I would say, cordial, but that was it. How do you feel, Sheriff Hart, about young children, and trying to keep it moving? I mean, I'm not trying to hang out or cause a problem or anything, but it seems like there's kind of an inconsideration for people with young children. And I don't want to go to parks where I have to sit there with the large swings and tell the kids they can't go there. So.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Jesse. And, you mentioned in your initial comments that we're all living here, we're all in this together. And, I have 3 grandkids that live locally. I haven't seen my grandkids in 7 weeks because we don't want to mix households. And my parents live a mile from my office, and I haven't seen them in 7 weeks. So, I understand the frustrations people are feeling. I'm living this thing just like everybody else is. But to answer your question, we were getting some mixed messages from state parks in terms of their enforcement posture. I met with Mike McNamee, who is in charge of all the rangers. And so what state parks has agreed to is to hold the same posture that we're holding on the county beaches in terms of if it's a family unit, you can sit down on the beach and play in the sand or do that type of activity that the state park rangers moving forward should not be moving people along. As long as there's not large groups congregating outside of a single family, you should not be bothered moving forward.
Thanks for answering that. Do we have another question from people out there? If you want to ask a question, just hit star 41. That raises your hand. Good evening.
I want to ask a question. Hi. Who's up?
Hi, this is John Leopold. Who are you?
I'm sorry. Hi, John. It's Johanna Bowen.
All right.
I mainly want to know about why the public health officer is adamant in keeping the bathrooms closed while they open the parking lots and have people at the hook. That struck me when I read about it. I haven't been down to check it out, but I understand it's still going on. That's kind of like such a big contradiction in terms of what's appropriate behavior for a community. That's my.
Well, yeah, I'll try to answer it, and Sheriff, if you have anything to add, that would be great. The bathrooms were closed at the parks because it's a shared facility, and the county was worried that we could not clean it enough to prevent the spread of disease. And because we have been working to have people recreate close to home, it's a weird trade-off that we have to find. But we didn't want to be a place that we were contributing or possibly contributing to the spread of the virus, and that's why the parks decided to close all the bathrooms. All right. Why don't we try another question? Star 41 if you'd like to ask a question. Good evening.
Ryan Charmaine, you're unmuted. You should be able to ask your question.
You might have your mute button on.
Yeah.
Hello?
Right.
Yep.
Hello. Good evening.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm just curious why we are doing parking passes on Pleasure Point, Live Oak area for day passes when we need to close that. I live on 38th. I've been driving down Pleasure Point it is crazy how many people from out of county are here. And so why are we getting profits to say, hey, go ahead, get this parking pass for a day pass I think we should not have that. I think it should be resident parking only, and that's it. Like, stop that right now.
Sure. No, I understand. You know, the reason we have a live oak parking program at any time is we're trying to find some way to bring order to the parking situation after people said years back that people coming to the beach created an impact on the neighborhood. So we started the live oak parking program almost 40 years ago. And this year, when we were looking at some of the crowds coming over, we limited parking spaces in the Hook and Moran parking lots, and we were concerned that people would then just end up parking all over the neighborhoods, and it would create a situation that we were trying to avoid. So we went for a 7-day parking program. Now, as the sheriff mentioned, and as you've heard maybe from our public health officer, we want people to be able to get out of their house. We realize you cannot just stay in your house, that we want people to exercise. And it's the feeling of many of us that people in Santa Cruz County should be able to come to the beach and be able to surf or enjoy the beach as well. And we didn't want that overwhelming the neighborhood, so we have the parking program in place. The parking program technology isn't sophisticated enough to say you live in Santa Cruz County, you get to have a day pass. You don't live in Santa Cruz County, you don't get to have a day pass. So if we stop selling day passes, then anybody else in Santa Cruz County wouldn't be able to come down and park there as well, and that's not something the county wants to be able to make happen. So it's an imperfect system, but we're trying to figure out some way to bring order to the parking that's there. It's not a money-making; it's a money-losing situation. Are there any more questions? If you want to ask a question, you can hit star 41. Good evening. Is anyone there?
Yeah, the wireless caller 3818, last 4 digits 3818. You just re-raised your hand. You're unmuted.
The wireless caller is 3818. You might want to check your mute button. Others, if you want to ask a question, hit star 41.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So everybody's talking about the beaches. I just wanted to talk about hiking trails. I'm an avid hiker, and I've been out hiking on the trails twice a week for several years in this area. And what I can say that I'm seeing on hiking trails is there's very few people, and there are no groups. There's no gatherings. There aren't people sitting around. There aren't hiking groups anymore. It's like 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 people, or a family of 3 or 4 hiking, and everyone is being so good. I'm just so amazed at how courteous and careful, people stepping off the trail for each other, backtracking if they have to. So I'm concerned about if they shut down the hiking trails again, I'm going to be really, really, really upset. I know that in some of the open space preserves over the hill, what they've done is implement one-way trails if they're afraid about people passing each other, which hardly ever happens, but that's one idea. So I urge the sheriff and the supervisor and the health director to really differentiate between parks and beaches. They're very different places, very different uses. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the comments, and I think we heard very clearly from people when we took the extraordinary action to close parks and beaches, which is what we thought we'd need to do at the moment where we were seeing a great influx We are not currently considering closing parks again. We have not closed our parking lots at parks either. And as far as I know, we haven't had a lot of problems there. So there's nothing under consideration right now. But we'll listen to the health officer, and if there's a reasonable threat and she thinks that they need to be closed, we would. But I have not heard her talk about that under consideration at this point. Sheriff Hart, have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that. Yeah, I think Gail Newell, who's our health officer, is really in support of and promoting people of getting outside, getting fresh air, doing activities that they can safely do. And so, but what I want people to realize, though, is that we're in a bit of a lull on this thing. And so these health officer orders, until there's a vaccine and until there's a pharmaceutical that can help with some of the symptoms, these orders can expand and contract weekly or monthly, or we just don't know. And so, but I think if Dr. Newell feels like people can do that safely, and the Bay Area, the surrounding Bay Area counties also feel like that, I think she is all in total support of keeping hiking trails and those types of areas open.
Yeah, right now the county has been successful at increasing the number of days it takes to double the number of cases, and we've moved from 6 days now up to about 11 days. So the more days in between doubling means it's a slower spread of disease. But anytime you loosen restrictions, we would expect that we would see some increased infections, because right now there's no known way to protect ourselves from the spread. And so we watch it's a daily activity for our health staff and everyone else to take a look at what's going on in our hospitals, out in the community, what we're seeing in infections or transmissions, to make sure we're keeping the community as safe as possible. Let's see if there's another question. If you want to ask a question, hit star 41. Otherwise, you'll be unmuted when it's your turn.
Judith Lomba?
Yeah.
All right. Hello, Judith.
Hi. I have a question that has nothing to do with beaches and trails. I would like to know, I know, finally, huh? I would like to know what Sheriff Hart's perspective is on, it seems like probation has been loosened for people who are picked up for criminal activity. And I read somewhere, and unfortunately I can't remember where, that some of this has to do with COVID, not wanting people in jails, but a lot of these people are repeat offenders. And so I'd like to know how he is handling, how you, Sheriff Hart, are handling this during this virus time, and what happens after.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Judith. So our county jail system locally always has been at between 100 and 125% of capacity, and so with this virus, we needed to create some capacity in our jail system to allow people to space out a little bit, and also to establish some quarantine units for people who are freshly housed, so that we don't put them right into the general population. And their concern is they could be asymptomatic, or they could be carrying the virus and they're just not showing it. So we've had to create some space. And so what happened was, because we're always at overcapacity, the presiding judge every month issues a 30-day release order every month for years now, because we don't have capacity. So somebody is within 30 days of completing their sentence, they get early released, and that's just standard procedures now in our county jail system for a long time. That's now been increased to 60 days for the presiding judge. So that's on the sentence side of it. The State Judicial Council issued an order that essentially revoked bail. It made bail on any charge outside of a serious violent felony, took those charges down to zero. And so regardless of what somebody's criminal history is, if they get caught, let's just say selling drugs, they'll get brought into the jail if the arresting agency chooses to arrest them, and they'll get fingerprinted, photographed, and because that's not violating a serious violent felony as defined by the penal code under 667.5 of the penal code, that they're released without having to post bond based on this judicial order. And so, of course, that's concerning in a lot of ways because what we're seeing, there's been 2 or 3 instances of people committing crimes every day. And so on these folks that are going out and they get caught breaking into a car one day, the next day they get caught shoplifting, the next day they do something else. What we've been doing is calling the presiding judge on those cases to see if the local judge will put a bail amount on that person so that we can at least get that person to arraignment. But the other side of that, too, though, is that the court systems are only operating at about 40 or 50% locally, and so it's also a challenge to get them into court as well. As I'm looking at crime trends, we're seeing increase in commercial burglaries. So we actually have a business team that has been meeting with all of our local businesses and doing inspections and making sure that they have all the right security. If somebody gets caught breaking into a business that's been closed because of the COVID virus, we're adding a charge of looting on there, which is considered a serious offense under 667.5, and they're being housed for that. So we're doing some things to try to balance it out a little bit, but we are not holding people at the level we were prior to COVID based on the public health officer's order, the presiding judge's order, and the state judicial council's order as well.
Thank you, Sheriff Hart. And with your indulgence, if we could stay on a few more minutes to answer a couple questions because we had trouble at the beginning. I'd like to try to see if we get to as many people as possible. If we don't get to everyone, you can send me your question and then we'll work to get it answered. Star 41 if you want to ask a question, but let's have the next one. Good evening. Anyone there?
Maria? Yeah, good evening.
Judy or Robert?
Hart, Supervisor Leopold. It's Robert Murillo calling in. Thank you for the town hall again. Sheriff Hart, I appreciate your perspective on many of these issues. I'm very pleased that you recognize that there's 2 sides to many of the questions in front of you. I have 2 questions, both brief, one for each of you. John, is it possible in the future for the town hall to see if you can also take in text messages? And my question for you, Sheriff Hart, what impact are we seeing in the homeless population from the COVID-19?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Robert. We're not seeing a large outbreak in the homeless population. What we've been instructed to do on the law enforcement side, that's all police departments and the sheriff's office, is to leave the homeless encampments in place unless there's other law enforcement issues going on around that. But there's many homeless encampments that people just don't see. They're in a lot of different gullies. They're spread out all over the county, and certainly there's a concentration in the city of Santa Cruz. And so if it's a group of people who are not bringing attention to themselves either by neighborhoods or to law enforcement, then we're leaving them in place because right now that's the safest thing to do. Now the county through their homeless services program has opened up a lot of shelter beds. They're reaching out to these encampments with staff and personnel, offering services, offering shelter beds, medical, food, all that type of stuff. So there's been a lot of community outreach done by the county to the actual homeless sites. And then in terms of my staff, if there is a group that is really causing a problem, they're doing warming fires, they're fighting and that kind of stuff, then we will bring in the county services and offer that to them and try to get them out of that neighborhood to where they're causing problems at.
Yeah, and the county is also, we've also using the Project Room Key, which is a program that was funded by the governor, and that is being used for those who are medically vulnerable or possibly need to be isolated. And that's at local hotel rooms. And the county has also been approved for I think 13 trailers that we're looking for the appropriate site for them to support a place where homeless folks could be separated from others if they need to be, and be able to address the situation. We've been very fortunate that we have not seen the problems that they've seen in other communities with spread of this virus among the homeless. And in our shelters, there's all sorts of safe distances that are marked off to ensure that we don't have a problem. As far as text messages go, we can look about doing something like that, or providing an email so people can shoot us questions via email. Tonight we had a bunch of problems with at the start of this call, and I appreciate that everyone hung on, and we're going to try to get to everyone's questions. Why don't we get another one right now? You'll be unmuted. Good evening.
Wireless caller with the last four digits 6870. They just dropped. All right, I will try.
If you don't want to ask, if your question's already been asked, you can just hit star 42 and your hand will go down. We're going to stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes maybe, and try to get to everyone.
And let me see.
We're past the time, so there might be people who are leaving the call too.
Just unmuted. I believe you may have asked a question prior, but your hand was still up. I didn't know if you had another question. This is the wireless caller 3818.
Are you there?
Hello?
Hello. You're on we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you tell us when the mandatory wearing of face masks will, in all businesses, will commence?
Sheriff Hart, you.
Yeah, so you
think
may have
it's going to be Saturday.
What's that, John?
Go on, Sheriff. Go on, Sheriff.
Yeah, you may have seen a local media that the county put out a press release last night that made it into the local media today. And I know the county council is just finishing up the final piece of that. And so it was my understanding it was going to be released later this week. But, John, you're saying Saturday is when it's going out?
I think that's what I've heard, that's Saturday. And just to be clear with everyone, we want people to cover their faces and when they go inside to essential businesses. They don't need to wear them outside when they're walking or hiking unless they can't keep 6 feet away from someone else. But it's really important that especially inside, that people wear some kind of face mask. And it doesn't have to be a surgical mask. It doesn't have to be an N95 mask. It can be a bandana. It can be a scarf. It can be a turtleneck. It can be a T-shirt. Just something to cover your nose and mouth, so in the event that you cough or sneeze, that you're not spreading those germs to someone else. And it also provides a measure of benefit to you to make sure that if someone else coughs or sneezes, that you won't be affected. But I think it's going to be Saturday.
And then I also heard, John, that or I read in the draft that went out today was that children 12 years or younger, that was optional, and the health officer saying that anybody 2 years or younger should not be wearing it just because of possibility of suffocation and that type of stuff.
Yeah, good point. I appreciate you bringing that up, especially on the young children of two and under. I think we got time for one or two more questions. If there's someone there, we'll take your question. Good evening. Hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
What's your question? Yeah, we can hear you. What's your question?
Sorry. It's Allison again. I'm just going to say one thing, and then you can respond back because you didn't actually respond to my specific question. But part of the order is that essential travel does not include traveling to exercise or get outside. Its essential travel is to go to the grocery store, the pharmacy, the doctor. So that's the part of the order that I really feel like needs to be enforced right now. That's all I'm going to say. I really wish that Gail was on this call so that she could actually talk to what the order is, because we can't afford to be lax right now. We need to keep it up at least until the order is over. That's all I'm going to say.
I would disagree with you.
We'll try to answer it this time. Thank you, Allison, for calling back.
I think it's
Sheriff, you want to start, and then I'll add?
Yeah, it's pretty clear in the health officer's order, and I think it's under Section 10, that essential travel to recreate or to exercise is allowed. It's clearly written in that document.
Yeah, the health officer who I've had on this telephone town hall, and I'll probably have again. I had her 2 or 3 weeks ago on this, and you can listen to her call on if you go to my Facebook page as a link, or if you receive my newsletter, there's also a link. But she believes very strongly about the importance for people getting out and exercising. We realize that we're asking an extraordinary request, which is people to shelter in place. But the health officer believes that for your mental health and your physical health, getting out is important. And essential travel to do that is part of that. Now, I understand the concerns that the shelter-in-place order should mean that the people in Santa Clara County stay in Santa Clara County, and the people in Santa Cruz County should stay in Santa Cruz County. And that's where we identify some of our biggest problems. But if someone from Watsonville wants to come to Pleasure Point or Felton, the county think that that's important for that to be able to go on. And given our numbers, we think that's safe too.
Hey, John, and I'm reading the order here, John, on bottom of page 3, section 12, subsection 3. It says, for the purpose of this order, individuals may leave their residence only to perform the following essential activities. Section 3 says to engage in outdoor recreation activities, including walking, hiking, bicycling, running, etc. So it's clearly allowable in the order.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the difficulty that we've handed you and all the officers in having to interpret the document and ask people to do something that they're very used to doing, which is being able to get out and recreate, get together, and all these things are very unusual, and the participation of so many people in the county has really helped limit the spread of this virus in Santa Cruz County. We're counting on everyone still working together. The health officer is coming up with a new order to replace the one that will end on May 3rd. And there may be some changes in that, but we don't expect major changes with that. And she'll have more information probably at the beginning of next week. I want to thank Sheriff Hart for being here this evening. I will try to post the recording of tonight's conversation on my Facebook page. And I also post regular updates, daily updates about things that are happening around this COVID pandemic. So if you like the Facebook page or follow the Facebook page, you'll get regular announcements. And the sheriff also has a Facebook page and a Twitter account that you can also follow and get up-to-date information. Let's all keep on working together so we can do our part to limit the spread of this transmission and make sure that when we get to the other side of this that we still have a great community. Thanks for being on here tonight, and thanks for your patience as we had trouble at the beginning with technical difficulties. Good evening.